The playoffs are here, and you can predict the action all the way to the finals with FanDuel Predicts. Predict the spread, the total points, and even the game-winning moments that make the playoffs. Sign up and get a $25 bonus with FanDuel Predicts.
Offered by FanDuel Prediction Markets, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant. 18-plus bonus is non-withdrawable and expires 7 days after receipt. Trading derivatives involves significant risk and may not be suitable for all investors. Manage your activity with their consumer protection tools. Restrictions apply. See terms at FanDuel.com/predicts/bonus-offer-terms.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now entering the Stone Zone for our special Memorial Day show. When I was in Washington, D.C. about a week ago, I went to Arlington National Cemetery to visit the grave of my political mentor, former Connecticut Governor, Congressman, and Ambassador John Davis Lodge. John Lodge was the brother of Henry Cabot Lodge, who was, of course, Richard Nixon's vice presidential running mate in 1960. They were both the sons of Senator Henry Cabot Lodge, who was Theodore Roosevelt's best friend and one of the founders of the modern Republican Party. Lodge was a very interesting guy. He had been a fairly popular movie star in the 1930s and 40s, starring in The Scarlet Empress with Marlene Dietrich, also as Shirley Temple's father in The Little Colonel. He was incredibly handsome, as was his brother Cabot Lodge. He went on to be elected to Congress, served one term as governor of Connecticut, and then was appointed ambassador to Spain by President Dwight Eisenhower, appointed ambassador to Argentina by President Richard Nixon, and then later on, with my help, since he gave me my start in politics, I helped him with his finish and persuaded President Ronald Reagan to appoint him ambassador to Switzerland. He was a proud Navy combat veteran. And as you look over the rolling hills and the many tombstones across Arlington Cemetery, you can't help but think about the significance of Memorial Day. Now, I didn't serve. My father did. I had an uncle who served in Korea. My friends who did all serve survived, thank God. I had a very low draft number. I can't say that for many of my contemporaries during the Vietnam War. So I find Memorial Day humbling. I'm deeply aware that my freedom exists because others sacrificed. They gave their lives. They lost people they loved. And in some cases, they buried their friends. So Americans like me could know peace and freedom. We can never repay what so many of them gave. All of us can do is try to live lives that reflect the values and the patriotism of those brave heroes who died protecting. God bless every military member and their families on this most precious of days. Memorial Day is a sacred day of remembrance, consecrated by blood, grief, sacrifice, and duty. So when someone says to you, Happy Memorial Day, that's not exactly the correct sentiment. It's actually not a holiday. It's not merely the unofficial beginning of summer. It's not a day for mattress sales or beach traffic or backyard cookouts, beer coolers, or retail promotions wrapped in red, white, and blue bunting. For millions of Americans today, Memorial Day is the worst day of the year. It's the day a mother stares at a folded flag inside a mahogany box. It's the day a widow runs her fingers across the cold marble of a grave at Arlington National Cemetery, as I did last week. It is the day a son remembers the father he barely knew except through medals, photographs, and stories whispered through tears. You see, Memorial Day is a sacred day of remembrance, consecrated by blood, grief, sacrifice, and duty. It's a day when Americans must bow their heads before the altar of the fallen and remember, as Ronald Reagan told us so many times, freedom is not free. Freedom is purchased in flesh and blood by young Americans who climbed hills under machine gun fire, stormed beaches under artillery barrages, and flew burning aircraft into enemy skies, froze in foxholes, downed in distant seas, and marched into battle knowing that they may never return home again. The story of Memorial Day begins not in comfort, but in catastrophe. Its origins were born from the smoldering ashes of the American Civil War. the deadliest conflict ever fought on American soil. The first formal Memorial Day observances emerged when grieving Americans decorated the graves of Union soldiers with flowers in what became originally known as Decoration Day. Yet the true roots of American sacrifice stretch back even further to Lexington and Concord on April 19, 1775, when a colonial militia stood before the most powerful empire and military on earth, the British Empire, and answered tyranny with musket fire. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the famous poet, later immortalized the first exchange as the shot heard round the world, because it was not merely the beginning of a revolution. It was the birth of an idea unlike any other in human history. America was founded upon the radical belief that our rights come from God, not kings, not governments, not bureaucracies, and most certainly not from tyrants. That idea has been defended ever since by generations of American warriors whose courage forged the Republic in every era of danger and uncertainty. The first Americans to die under the flag of the United States fell during the Revolutionary War. Approximately 4,435 American soldiers were killed in combat during the American Revolution, while more than 25,000 died overall from disease, exposure, imprisonment, and deprivation. The Continental Army bore the overwhelming burden, through colonial militias, and early naval forces also suffered massive losses. Shortly after independence, America confronted the Barbary Wars. Very little written about that. Conflicts that many modern Americans barely remember, but which shaped the nation's understanding of sovereignty and military power. The Barbary Wars were fought against North African pirate states, including Tripoli, Algiers, Tunis, and Morocco, whose rulers kidnapped U.S. sailors, enslaved Christians, hijacked merchant ships, and extorted tribute payments from Western nations. European powers often paid the pirates for safe passage. America refused. Thomas Jefferson understood that a republic unwilling to defend itself would soon cease to exist. The First Barbary War, from 1801 to 1805, approximately 35 Americans were killed in battle, primarily sailors and Marines. Total deaths were roughly 74. The Second Barbary War, that was in 1815, resulted in approximately 4 battle deaths and roughly 138 total deaths. These early conflicts cemented the United States Navy and Marine Corps as guardians of American commerce and freedom abroad. The War of 1812 followed, often called America's Second War for Independence. British forces burned their way through Washington, D.C., including burning the White House to the ground, while American soldiers and sailors fought desperately to preserve the young republic. Approximately 2,260 Americans were killed in battle, and roughly 15,000 died overall, mostly from disease. The Army accounted for approximately 1,950 battle deaths, while the Navy lost around 265 personnel, and the early Marine Corps lost roughly 45. Then there was the Mexican-American War. That was from 1846 to 1848, expanding the United States across the continent, but it came at a terrible cost. Approximately 1,733 Americans were killed in battle, and more than 13,000 died overall. The Army suffered nearly all battle casualties, while Marines and Navy personnel also perished in combat operations. Then, of course, came the American Civil War, the great national crucible that nearly destroyed the Republic entirely. Brother fought brother. Entire towns lost their young men in a single afternoon. More than 655,000 Americans died overall, including roughly 215,000 battle deaths between Union and Confederate forces. The overwhelming majority served in the Army, while naval losses were significantly smaller. The Civil War remains the deadliest conflict in American history because Americans killed other Americans on an industrial scale never before seen on this continent. After the Civil War, of course, came the Indian Wars, frontier conflicts, interventions, and overseas operations. Thousands more Americans died during campaigns against hostile tribes during the Seminole Wars and in smaller military expeditions that secured and expanded the nation. The Boxer Rebellion in China claimed approximately 68 American battle deaths. Then the Spanish-American War of 1898 cost approximately 385 battle deaths and roughly 2,446 total deaths. It was there that Colonel Theodore Roosevelt became a national figure with his Rough Riders. The Philippine-American War that followed claimed approximately 1,020 battle deaths and more than 4,000 total deaths. World War I introduced America to trench warfare, mustard gas, machine guns, and industrialized death on a horrifying scale. More than 53,000 Americans were killed in battle, and over 116,000 died overall. The Army and the American Expeditionary Forces bore the brunt of combat losses, while the Navy and Marine Corps also sustained significant casualties. World War II transformed the entire planet into a furnace of violence. The United States lost approximately 291,557 battle dead, and more than 405 total military personnel perished. The Army and the Army Air Forces suffered more than 318,000 deaths. The Navy lost more than 62,000 men. The Marine Corps lost more than 24,000. The Coast Guard lost nearly 2,000. Young Americans crossed oceans to storm Normandy, fight through the jungles of the Pacific, liberate concentration camps, and destroy fascism and Japanese militarism. Entire cemeteries across Europe and Asia now stand as eternal monuments of American sacrifice. The Korean War, often called the Korean Conflict, followed only 5 years later. Often called the Forgotten War, Korea has tragically overshadowed the monumental shadow of World War II and the later trauma of the Vietnam War. Yet the men who fought in Incheon, Chosin Reservoir, and along the frozen Korean peninsula displayed extraordinary courage under unimaginable conditions. Approximately 33,700 Americans were killed in battle, and more than 36,000 died overall. The Army suffered the majority of losses, while Marines endured catastrophic casualties during some of the war's fiercest fighting. The Korean War veterans deserve far greater recognition today than history has often afforded them. Vietnam became the most painful chapter in American history, however. Approximately 58,220 Americans died during that conflict, including roughly 47,000 battle deaths. The Army lost more than 38,000, the Marine Corps nearly 15,000. The Navy and Air Force each lost thousands more. Some of those that I went to high school and college with went and never returned. Young Americans fought bravely in jungles, villages, and rice paddies against a ruthless communist insurgency. Yet when many returned home, they were not greeted as heroes. Some were cursed at, humiliated, and even spit upon by radical anti-war activists poisoned by self-hatred and left-wing propaganda. Those Vietnam veterans deserve parades, gratitude, and reverence. Instead, many received contempt from the very nation they risked their lives to defend. It remains one of the greatest moral disgraces, in my opinion, of modern American society. In fact, President Trump personally and very quietly financed the Vietnam Veterans Welcome Home Parade in New York City on May 7, 1985, with a $1 million endowment, as well as raising additional funds, and he also served as co-chairman of the New York Vietnam Veterans Memorial Commission, appointed by his longtime nemesis, Mayor Ed Koch. The Cold War carried America into Lebanon, Grenada, Panama, Somalia, and countless covert and conventional operations around the globe. Then, of course, came the Gulf War, where approximately 294 Americans died, including roughly 149 to 288 battle deaths, depending on classification. Then came the global war on terror after September 11, 2001. It's long been my contention that we were lied into one of those wars, that Vice President Dick Cheney led us into battle for personal profit based on two different lies. The lie that they had somehow been lied, that Iraq had somehow been involved in the attack on America on 9/11. When we come back, we're going to talk more about what Memorial means to me and to you. God bless you for joining us today in the Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And continuing with the story of America at war, in Afghanistan, approximately 2,325 Americans died, including nearly 1,900 battle deaths. And of course, in Iraq, more than 4,492 Americans died, with battle deaths ranging between 3,500 and 4,000, depending on classification. Thousands more returned home wounded, physically and psychologically, carrying scars invisible to the naked eye, but permanent upon the soul. Americans' military sacrifices extended beyond combat alone. Training accidents have claimed enormous numbers of American lives. During World War II alone, approximately 15,000 American airmen died in training accidents before they ever saw combat. From 2006 to 2021, more than 5,200 active duty personnel died in training mishaps and accidents. Since 1980, tens of thousands of military accident deaths have occurred, many during exercises intended to prepare America for combat. Every one of those lives mattered. Everyone represented a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, or a friend who raised her hand and volunteered to serve the United States of America. Today, according to the Defense Prisoner of War and MIA Accounting Agency, approximately 80,000 to 83,000 Americans remain unaccounted for from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Cold War, and other conflicts. Roughly another 7,300 remain missing from Korea alone. More than 1,500 remain missing from Vietnam. Some were prisoners of war. Some were lost at sea. Some vanished behind enemy lines. Many families never heard their answers. Yet America continues to search for them because this nation understands a sacred principle. We do not abandon our dead. The total number of Americans who died for our freedoms and liberties, approximately 1.3 million men and women. They came from every race, creed, religion, state, and economic background. Farmers from Iowa, steelworkers from Pennsylvania, ranchers from Texas, fishermen from Maine, coal miners from West Virginia, immigrants who barely spoke English. We remember them all today on this solemn Memorial Day. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to The Stone Zone, and we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to The Stone Zone for our discussion of this solemn Memorial Day. Actually, online, I've posted pictures of Dwight Eisenhower, Navy Lieutenant Richard M. Nixon, and General George S. Patton, three of my all-time favorites as men who served. Right now, I want to talk about another who served. That is Tulsi Gabbard, who resigned last Friday as the Director of National Intelligence, who served with honor as a combat veteran in Afghanistan. And joining me to discuss this is Mark Vargas. He's the editor-in-chief at Illinois Review, also a frequent contributor at Newsmax. And Mark, you wrote a terrific piece entitled Tulsi Gabbard Restored Trust in America's Intelligence Community that I really want to talk about because her brief tenure there is really quite extraordinary. If you are a Trump supporter, and if you understood the deep state effort to delegitimize Trump's election in 2016 and the illicit, seditious conspiracy to remove him from power, then you would understand the enormous contribution that Tulsi Gabbard made to this country.
Roger, it is. It's unbelievable. And when you think about when President Trump nominated her, she had one mission, and that was to restore integrity to America's intelligence apparatus and return its core national security responsibilities instead of utilizing the intel agencies to spy and create fake charges against their political enemies. And I can only imagine the pushback that she received behind the scenes from these career corrupt officials that were pushing back at every step of the way. But when you look back at her brief tenure as DNI, it really is remarkable. I mean, I outlined in this article, she launched a director's initiative group, specifically to expose politicization, declassifying massive troves on the Russia hoax, Obama-era surveillance of the Trump campaign, and other widespread abuses. And she revoked security clearance of, get this, 37 officials tied to these scandals and these leaks. And we can't forget, she fired senior analysts whose assessments read like partisan op-eds instead of straight out intelligence matters. And, with ODNI 2.0, these reforms, she cut the bloated bureaucracy by over 40% and saving taxpayers $700 million a year. She pushed back on the declassifications of the JFK files, COVID origins, and she created real transparency. I mean, for the first time, Anthony Fauci and his team are in real trouble because of Tulsi Gabbard and her work as DNI. And so it really is remarkable what she's accomplished and the legacy that she leaves within the intelligence community in just a short period of time.
Well, and as you point out, she did it all very quietly. So she essentially completely exposed the whole Russia hoax as a completely falsified narrative. And she brought it right to the doorstep of Barack Obama and Vice President Joe Biden, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, the ringleader, CIA Director John Brennan, the Islamic convert, FBI Director James Comey, the Director of National Intelligence, General James Clapper, Rod Rosenstein, the late Robert Mueller. This was indeed, as the president told us, it was a hoax. She declassified the documents that proved that beyond any doubt whatsoever. The New York Times, the Washington Post, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, they still refuse to admit it, but she accomplished all of that very quietly. As you pointed out, unlike so many officials in Washington who chased cable news television appearances and media praise, Gabbard never sought the spotlight. She worked very tirelessly behind the scenes, and she focused on reforms instead of headlines. She only spoke when she had something very specific to declassify. And therefore, it's very hard for me to understand how some, such as my former friend Laura Loomer, who claims to be a Trump loyalist, can criticize her as she has. Not only did she expose the Russian collusion hoax, but she also exposed the two phony impeachments. You remember the cute little Vindman brothers in their twin outfits and the so-called whistleblower Eric Ciaramella, who was indeed a CIA operative being coached by Congressman, now Senator Adam Pencilneck Schiff. The whole thing was a fraud, and Tulsi Gabbard proved it. It is no longer conjecture. It is an undisputed truth. Yet there are some with even in the Trump administration, who criticize her. It's very hard to understand.
And President Trump has been talking about this for years, and you know this better than anyone else, Roger. And he's been warning that the intelligence agencies were being used to target political enemies, that they were spying on his 2015 presidential campaign. But previous administrations ignored this. Why? Because they were complicit and they were participating. And I think that Tulsi's work, this is God's work. This really puts Obama and Biden administrations into a corner, and they have a lot of questions to answer. And conservatives have been demanding answers for a long time, ever since President Trump exposed all of this, because this is what the American people have wanted. An intelligence committee that serves the people and the Constitution, not the permanent D.C. ruling class, like the Comeys and the Muellers and the Biden and the Obama and the Schiffs, right? It's to serve the American people. And she took real swings at the deep state, and they pushed back and they attacked her. Even some within the so-called MAGA movement have continued to attack, like Laura Loomer. But what she has done is absolutely remarkable and historical. And the American people have her to thank when these corrupt officials are put in handcuffs. And it's all because of the work of Tulsi Gabbard.
Here's a statement from President Donald Trump, who correctly says, unfortunately, after having done a great job, Tulsi Gabbard will be leaving the administration on June 30th. Her wonderful husband, Abraham, has been recently diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer, and she rightfully wants to be with him, bringing him back to good health as they currently fight a very tough battle together. I have no doubt that she will soon be better than ever, that he will soon be better than ever. Tulsi's done an incredible job, and we will miss her. I think that sums it up. Yet the Wall Street Journal keeps insisting that she was forced out. What bothers me is, as soon as she began looking into the 2020 election a charge very specifically given to her by President Trump. As soon as she began examining the security and the integrity of the electronic voting machines, as soon as she led that raid with the FBI on the warehouse in Fulton County, Georgia, seizing the 300,000 paper ballots that were allegedly mailed in but never folded in half, we hear from this incredible report by the veteran journalist Catherine Herridge that the Central Intelligence Agency began surveilling the Director of National Intelligence and her entire working group. So we have the government spying on another wing of the government. And then we had a whistleblower step forward last week. My sources tell me everything that whistleblower said was accurate. They were upset because Tulsi Gabbard worked hand in hand with Congressman Anna Paulina Luna of Florida when the president's order to declassify all of the documents pertaining to the Kennedy assassination. He limited that to the documents that were in the possession of the National Archives. Well, that's a good start, but the problem is that a number of government agencies, such as the CIA and the FBI and the IRS and Army Intelligence and Naval Intelligence and others, had never turned over key documents to the National Archives. And therefore, between Tulsi Gabbard and the use of subpoenas from Anna Paulina Luna's subcommittee, they ferret out the truth about the Kennedy assassination. And we have yet to have, and we're going to have, hearings about the assassination of Senator Robert Kennedy and Dr. Martin Luther King. Those are yet to come. What we do now know is that the Warren Commission was a complete fraud. We know indisputably that the government's knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald and Oswald's active participation as both a CIA and an FBI asset is now completely undisputed. This is due to the courage of Tulsi Gabbard. And it is why I believe that last week, as we learned, just before they were about to declassify them, there was a raid is too strong, but the CIA moved aggressively to seize 40 boxes of documents that had not yet been declassified. So Tulsi Gabbard strikes me as a truth teller. From a political point of view, I must say I met her when she was still an independent, when she was contemplating what to do with her life after leaving the Democrat Party or after the Democrat Party left her. She called me Thursday night at 8:30 because we are close friends, because I was her bridge into Trump world, because I helped persuade her to support Donald Trump. I later helped convince her to become a Republican, and I was a great advocate for her appointment as the head of the Office of Defense or of Intelligence. Now, some people thought that was strange. Why would she call a political operative? It's very simple. We're friends. We are very good friends. And I think that those who believe that they've heard the last of Tulsi Gabbard are wrong. Like Ronald Reagan, she's incredibly sure-footed. She's incredibly confident. She's cautious in the sense that during her entire tenure, she never made any claim about the voting machines or about Russian collusion or about the impeachments that she could not back up with empirical evidence. I think she has a star quality that is underestimated by some. I have no doubt whatsoever that she has a great political future.
There's no doubt. And Roger, she appeals to the mainstream Democrat Party who no longer relate to the Democrats. And that's why her move to the Republican Party, particularly under President Trump's leadership, is so historical, because she represents what every Democrat feels, and that is, I don't recognize my party anymore. And she is far from over. And of all the directors of national intelligence since this position has been created, no one has made the impact that she has made in just a short period of time. And she really does make history with exposing the deep fraud and the surveillance programs that were spying on everyday Americans, spying on President Trump and on his team with no legal justification. She really confronted this corrupt establishment, didn't back down, and created transparency that we've never yet seen in history out of the Director of National Intelligence. It truly is remarkable.
Yeah, you mentioned this, but I think among the best things she did was revoking security clearances for as many as 37 officials, many of whom were signers of that letter, falsely claiming that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation, when you and I both know that it was absolutely, completely accurate and shockingly true. A compendium of bribery, crime, and treason. She is absolutely fearless, but she's also she's very cool. She's great on television. She's a great interview. For some reason, Laura Loomer keeps insisting that I'm going to manage her campaign for president in 2028. In all honesty, I don't think she's going to run for president in 2028. I do think she will be president. I do think she'll be president someday. I don't think it'll be in 2028. In our party, as you know, sitting vice presidents are rarely dumped. I'm a big fan of J.D. Vance. And if for some reason he didn't want to run, which I really doubt, Marco Rubio certainly would be a great candidate as well, although in our party we don't dump sitting vice presidents. I think Tulsi Gabbard has done the great thing. Rather than reach for power, she's made the decision to put her husband and her family first. If she stayed and reached for power instead of that, then she would not be the worthy leader that we think she is. She would not be put here by providence, which I believe she has been. Mark, I want to thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. Tell folks where they can go to see the Illinois Review.
Sure. Thank you, Roger. IllinoisReview.com. Follow us on X at Illinois Review, and me on X at Mark A. Vargas.
All right. That's Mark Vargas with a great analysis of Tulsi Gabbard. Thank you for joining us today in the Stone Zone. When we come back, we'll talk about the other great reason I like Memorial Day. And that is, this is the beginning of the season where you can wear linen, madras, seersucker, break out those white bucks or those spectators. This is time for a change of wardrobe, and that is one of my favorite subjects. Mark, thanks for joining us, and thank you for listening to the Stone Zone. We'll be right back.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone, along with praying for all of those who gave their lives that we may be free on this Memorial Day. I know you join me in also praying for Tulsi Gabbard and her husband, who unfortunately was diagnosed with a very rare form of bone cancer. This idea that she was forced out or pushed out is a canard, it's a falsehood. The Wall Street Journal, which used to be a newspaper but now is just a propaganda front for the far left, has carried this line. It's simply not true. But with Memorial Day approaching, every gentleman should understand and appreciate something called the spectator shoe. Now, there are shoes that whisper, and then there are shoes that announce themselves with the brazen confidence of a trumpet at a midnight jazz club. Spectator shoes, you've seen them, do not politely enter the room. They arrive. They declare with unapologetic clout that the man wearing them has no interest in sartorial anonymity. These are the two-tone shoes, brown and white, black and white, and they're only acceptable between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So to understand the spectator shoe is to understand the peculiar alchemy of utility, rebellion, and aristocratic leisure. Known in Britain as the correspondent shoe, a moniker dripping with insinuation and scandal, it's a design that straddles propriety and provocation with remarkable dexterity. It is at once a gentleman's shoe and a cad's calling card. The origins of this flamboyant contrivance are far more pragmatic than its later reputation might suggest to you. They were indeed not a product created during the Art Deco era, but that era was that popularized them. In 1868, the firm of John Lobb in London was widely credited with crafting a two-tone cricket shoe intended to solve a pedestrian persistent problem. All white footwear, although aesthetically pristine, was mercilessly betrayed by the English countryside. Mud, grass, and dust conspired to sully the appearance of even the most fastidious sportsman. So Lobb's innovation was elegantly simple. Reinforce the high wear areas, the toe cap and heel, with darker leather, thereby concealing the inevitable grime while preserving the illusion of immaculate dress. From this utilitarian genesis emerged something far more intriguing to me. The two-tone shoe migrated from the playing field to the sidelines, adopting a well-heeled spectators who found them a perfect synthesis for practicality and panache. The name spectator, thus, not only merely description, but also a social designation. These were shoes for men who watched, not labored. Shoes for those whose presence at the match itself was kind of a performance. They go well with seersucker or a cream-colored linen. These are the shoes of summer. Their aesthetic lineage runs deeper still, drawing upon the brogue traditions of Ireland and Scotland, where perforated leather once served the decidedly unglamorous function of draining water from the bog-trodden footwear. So in the spectator shoe, however, these perforations became purely decorative, or ornamental flourish, if you will, that lent visual complexity and certain rakish charm to the shoes. The result was a hybrid and structural dignity of the Oxford, the decorative exuberance of the brogue, and the visual audacity of the contrasting collars. So now, after Memorial Day is the best time. So now you can also go for the white bucks. That is also acceptable. But you can only wear these shoes, which look great with a seersucker suit, or like I say, a cream-colored linen suit, or even a light gray trouser, or a Madras jacket and light gray trousers. You can only wear them between Memorial Day and Labor Day. So this Memorial Day, take a look for them. I'll be wearing them almost immediately and virtually every day until Labor Day because they are my favorite. These are the shoes of speakeasies, dance halls, and smoky, sultry cabarets. Jazz musicians, dancers, and more flamboyant elements of society have embraced them with fervor, and now you can do the same. Thank you for joining us today on the Stone Zone. I'm Roger Stone, and enjoy your spectator shoes.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?